This video was actually supposed to be one where I was going to talk about how Genji right now was really good. He fit really well into the meta and generally trying to get more people back onto playing Genji. I know there's a lot of people that jumped off after they removed his 2 extra damage. Even though he still got a lot of buffs during his previous kind of like huge Genji buff. I know there's still a lot of people that kind of jumped off, and I wanted to kind of reintroduce him to that system and kind of talk a little bit more about like how to play him and why he's still really good. And then the patch went through. Patch note, the March 11, 2021. I've already talked about why I didn't think this was a good one, but in that video, I didn't really cover a lot of the math. I didn't go over a lot of the numbers, and I didn't have time to play him in competitive, of course, since it was on the test server. Now I played him in competitive. I've grinded him for, I've grinded placement gains on 2 of my Smurfs, which lays around the mid-diamond and the master level, right around there, both of the Smurfs kind of in that area. And I want to talk about, I want to rant about why Genji right now is so fucking bad. Hello beautiful and lovely gamers, my name is Jonal. Let's get this thing quick out of the way. Like the video, helps promote it, has spread it around. Comment down below your thoughts, opinion if you played Genji on the new patch. I think discussing this is the best way, not just raging and rambling, but actually trying to discuss why I don't think this is a good thing. For those who are new to the channel, pressing the subscribe button is of course very much appreciated, helping us to push toward 30,000, which would be insane. But on top of that, of course, if you want educational video in Overwatch and also other FPS games, I was a tier 2 coach in Contenders. I have been 4.2k on Genji, and I've grinded Overwatch since the open beta. So let's really just talk about these numbers. And if you guys could share this around, I know there's some people on the Genji main subreddit that has been sharing my videos from time to time. Anything really, I just want to get this shit out to hopefully revert or keep this change but add a buff on top of it. Currently, Genji feels really good. What the patch note did was recovery was lowered from 0.75 to 0.68 for all shuriken fire mode. So it's primary and his secondary fire. Now, that is as some people pointed out in my comment section of my previous video, a 10%. It's actually not a 10%. It is a 9.3% a fire rate increase. However, and this is pretty fucking big, it doesn't matter how big the percentage is of the increase, right? Like, oh, now you will shoot 9.3% faster. If the number is 0.07, if that is the amount of seconds you're slicing off, you're not even slicing off, it was 0.7 seconds. You're not slicing off 1 second. You're slicing off 0.0 seconds of your fire time. It feels smoother. There is not, like, if you cancel your deflect, you get that a little bit like faster response time when you fire your shuriken, which allows you to deflect to kind of mitigate damage and then finish them off before they can shoot you. It kind of brings that power balance of how you play around deflect a little bit better. It feels just generally cleaner when you're playing with him. But that doesn't make up for the rest of it. Dragonblade ultimate cost increased by 15%. Again, that is 15%. And why is that so bad? Once again, people started bringing up the numbers like, oh, it's just so and so much damage different. The point is that if you play a lot of Genji, you know this. Previous patch, or how Genji has normally been working since his last ultimate, is that Nano Boost and Dragon Blade are about the same time. They were always synced. Like, if you were if you were playing your game and your Ana was playing decently, you would almost always have Nano and Blade at the same time. Almost always. If you were a good Genji player, you would normally have it a little bit before your Ana. But still, most of the time, because Ana is a real strong hero, an average Ana player and a good Genji player would sync almost every single time. The same went for Trance. Now, Trance, on the opposing side, would almost always be up when you had your Blade. Unless you played really good and the enemy temps were garbage. Then you could actually odd farm a Trance with like 10% or 55%. So if you got the Blade, you synced up with your Ana, you have been farming hard, then you could actually Blade, the very first Blade, you could Blade outside of the Trance. If you were really good. If you were playing good, the enemy tanks were doing mistakes, you could do that. And beat Lucio's ultimate, you could also a lot of time outfarm. Again, if you played it decently, you could farm on tanks, and you got a high, you were really, really active, you could a lot of time also outfarm a beat, which was a little bit easier than outfarming a trance. Now, those are very important. You have to understand how important Dragon Blade is for a Genji player. Genji is, and again, the whole point of this was that they wanted to make sure that, he felt more impact outside of his ultimate, and therefore turned down his ultimate charge. And that makes sense. But you haven't addressed the issue. The increase to fire rate is 0.07 seconds. Even though it is a 10%, about, right, 9.3% fire rate increase, it doesn't make up the difference. 0.0 seconds isn't enough. If I told you you're getting a 2,000% salary increase, but I pay you $1 an hour, you're not gonna be too happy. Comparatively, you're gonna make less money than if you're gonna get a smaller bonus if I gave you a 5% increase and you make $10,000 an hour, right? Like, seriously, percentages is very, very nice, but you need to make sure that the base number is big enough. If not, then it doesn't matter anymore. And the fire rate, while it feels good, while it is clean, it doesn't really make any more plays. Like, it's not like that is the difference between you getting a kill in majority of the times. It's not that is, you are all of a sudden able to deal more damage in main groups. You're not all of a sudden like have this incredible damage pressure and more pressure present on the map that you had previous patch. It feels good, but gameplay-wise and stat-wise, it doesn't really do anything. What does hinder Genji is a ultimate increase of 15%. Again, your honors are normally gonna build before you, and that's huge because sometimes you are like 75, 80, 85% away from your blade when your honor has nano, and that's insane. That amount of time. Why shouldn't she just burn it on a tank? Like, her waiting that long is you losing a team fight. A lot of time, honors get them in team fights or in the beginning of team fight, and if she has to wait for you to farm that's pretty damaging. You gotta burn it on a tank instead to win that team fight, and all of a sudden, it's far more costly for them to wait for the Genji to get the blade to pop a nano blade. On top of that, since Genji was meta, people, and this is actually something that Tommy from our Discord community pointed out, I'll link my Discord server down below if you want to join an awesome community, that it feels like after, Genji was played a lot during a patch when he got damage increase and all that stuff, people got really good at countering his blade. And blade is an ultimate that is very counterable. We have Baptiste with Immortality Field. That's just an ability, and he's very meta that just counters straight up. We have flashbangs from McCrease. We have Maze that can wall us off for our team so we don't get back up and freeze us. We have people that are just solo grabbing, solo shattering, solo fluxing. We have whole hogs that can ult us. We have hogs that can hook us. We have, of course, Ana sleeps, with people are being better and better at hitting these days. We have Junkrat who can mine us or just generally damage us so hard that we can't really engage. Without nano, blading is really difficult. Even in like diamond tier, it is starting to get more and more difficult without your nano or your damage boost, because there's so many fucking counters, which there have been for a long time. If you're nanoed, you can a lot of time get a kill, get two, kind of chain them onto the others, duck some abilities. But without that, the fact that you have to swing twice, you will get nuked in most of the scenarios before you get those off. There's so much counterplay to you, and on top of that, now that there's no way of me outbuilding my Sen, there's no way of me outbuilding a Lucio anymore because of how long time it fucking takes for me to get to that point. It is ridiculous. It makes him it does a Genji isn't really playable right now. He's really fucking bad. If we talk about also what heroes are currently being played in the meta, this might change if you watch this a couple of months later. But currently in the meta, as I'm making this video, what you see a lot is, and this also goes when I private coach people in like silver and gold and some GM players, so I see this pretty much a broad spectrum of it. You see a lot of Ryan and Zarya, so you see a lot of Zaryas, which is real bad for Genji. You see some Sigma players from time to time, which is quite annoying for Genji because they can really zone us out from our spots. You see a bunch of Maze, you see a bunch of McCrease, you see some Moira, some Baptiste, right? All of those really damaging to Genji. You also actually see, I've seen a lot of Sens for some reason, and some Lucios. Mostly Lucios because they like to speed, and now there's a bunch of beats. right? You see all of these heroes who are really good at dealing with Genji. So already is it more difficult to gain ult charge, but it also is really costly to move around the map. And when you finally dive into the backline, a lot of time you'll find like a McCree and sometimes a Junkrat or a Mei, and the Kree can stun you, and there's a Zarya, so she will bubble someone, and you can time all this, you can take out ultimates, and your team can push, and if you have a good team, that's great. If your main group is good, that's great. If you play dive, Genji's really good, but a lot of teams play death ball right now, and if your team just has a worse death ball, or because you're playing Genji, you can apply a lot of damage, but the damage that you're applying, you could probably have done better on someone else. Even a Tracer or a McCree, or you could have played a Mei on wall, or you could play Junkrat on defensive side, and you could deal a lot more damage. There's so many heroes you could have played differently in Death Ball that could just outshine, like for example a Hanzo, that can outshine the Genji. And that's the issue. You don't really have presence. I'm standing there, and I'm out-damaging my team. I am fucking bullying their tanks to the ground. And I'm still getting outfarmed by my Ana. And now she has nano, and I'm at 77%. And of course, she'll burn it on my Rhine. Now I have to vanilla blade into a goddamn Mei, Moira, Baptiste, with a McCree and a Zarya, right? And a Rhine, they'll try to solo shatter me. All of a sudden, that's kind of what I have to deal with. And at that point, my blade is just useless. A lot of time, there will be a Sen on the map. And then it's just like, it has always been difficult to play with the Sen. But because my Ana constantly has to hold nano for me, and has to wait for me to build up my blade, even though I am farming on their tanks, doesn't really matter. In team fights, a lot of time, you're just shooting at a wall that is just being healed. And there's nothing you can do because you don't have the damage output as a Genji. A lot of time, if you want to go for a dive, you have a split second to kill the guy, or else he's getting swamped by stuns and heals and bubbles and shields and peels and immortality fields, and they can fade and they can dash and they can heal. There's so much shit that was already difficult enough to play around, which makes it easier if you're playing dive, because then your tanks will go in and they will draw aggro and they will deal damage and they will CC and drag out resources. A little bit easier if you're playing dive. But if you don't have an aggressive main group, or a main group like a Ryan Zarya combo that for some reason can't push, and that might be because they just are worse players, the enemy team is playing really good, the enemy team comp is like a Mei Kree, and you only have a Kree Genji, right? Then it's like the Genji really has to off-angle all the time, and just prop in damage to them, and look for an opportunity. If your team can't make opportunities for you, then the Genji is really bad. He has always been that. Like, then you have to really be crisp on the mechanics, and the enemy team needs to not pay attention when you dive a target, right? If your team doesn't make opportunities by pushing in, dealing damage, dragging out a lot of resources, so if your team is getting put on the back burner all the time because there's a fucking McCree and a Mei on you, then too bad. GG. You can sit there and you can off-angle and you can try that. But if you try to off-angle, there's a McCree that can shoot at range, there's a Zarya that will try to beam you, there's aggressive Moira players that will try to fade in your face and just deal a shit ton of damage with orbs. There might be a Sigma on the field instead, and well, he's gonna just bomb your position away. There might be a Mei, so good luck trying to get in there, there's a bunch of range on you, right? So if you try to close the gap, you'll get stunned and fucked, and if you try to keep the distance, well, you're playing against Mei and McCree from range. If you're in dash range, maybe you can do something about that if you hit the shots and they don't get pocketed, but a lot of time they will, because there's a Moira and a Baptiste in the team. Now, because of that, you're not building blade fast enough, which a lot of time was the thing. Like, okay, their team is strong, fucking build tanks, but I build blade really fast. So I can farm blade and I can just blade and I can win of that. And if I'm good, I can farm out from their trance or their beat, and I will time it with my nano, and right, that's my carry potential. But when they increase my ult charge cost, so I have to spend longer, that's a bunch of blade that's not getting farmed. That's a bunch of team fight that starts when I don't have blade, where my nano has to go to a tank because I couldn't blade early enough in the engage, and now we are just down resources and we lose that. And it's just so costly. It is so costly throughout a match. One team fight when the cost is increased by 50%, sure, but the entire match, it's so many misplays, it's so many lost team fights, it's so many shitty positions that we're gonna put in, where again, there's some team fights that they just win because they all stack, and I'm just sitting there trying to farm, and it feels so bad when he's so weak. And here comes my last rant. If we're gonna do this, if Blizzard is gonna fuck Genji like this, if he's really gonna get just absolutely treat it like this. He's already in a bad spot when it comes to just how many counters there's. If you carry on Genji, you're normally really skilled, right? You are pretty skilled by Nano Blade because there's so many counters to you. There shouldn't be an excuse for the Poison side not to try to deal with the blade unless you're nanoed. And even then, there's a shit ton you can do with your own ultimates to counter 2 ultimates. Remember, you commit 2 ultimates for the Genji to win that team fight, right? That's pretty expensive, right? That's the same as saying, oh, we just grab Dragon, right? It's a pretty expensive combo that just became more expensive and worse timed, both for your team and also because the enemy team will have their support suit up. And if that is what they're gonna do to him, fair enough. But fix this fucking wall climb then. Come on, Blizzard. And I'm tired of this. There's so many times, again, it's an art. It's something that you just need to learn on Genji. And you can say, oh, I haven't been playing enough Genji lately, and therefore I have lost my touch on how to climb walls. There were so many times, and I'll show you an example right on screen now. How the fuck am I not climbing this wall? I fail wall climb like 2 or 3 times. Very expensive. That gets me killed. I should escape. The enemy team doesn't even just spend an age on killing me, right? The enemy team is bad, and it doesn't matter. I can't wall climb because, I hit the wrong angle. Because I came in from a weird angle. Or something. I'm not even sure why. Again, you just kind of learn how to do wall climbs after a while, but this is just ridiculous. There's just a lot of spots where, okay, I have dived in, I have pushed up my position, I need to do that because that's how I play Genji. I'm constantly off-angling, constantly applying pressure. I need to now retreat to this wall because I burn my resources. I need to get to this wall, I need to climb up to the high ground and play there. That's the whole point of my hero, is to get easily to high ground. And then, because the game engine is built like that, or the Genji is coded in a weird way, and this has been on for ages, he just doesn't climb this wall. And normally, the arguments for other Genji players like, oh, you should just, you need to just learn. You just need to learn to do it, right? But how the fuck am I not climbing these walls? I'm hitting flat surfaces with my wall climb. How am I not auto climbing them? It is ridiculous that this thing is that I have no clue who on Blizzard thought it was a good idea to nerf Genji. There's so many counters to him right now, and again, you can talk about pro play and how he's played in pro play, but that's different. In pro play, a lot of time when I play Genji, they're playing dive. You don't almost get to play dive, and then you can say, oh, then you shouldn't play Genji, and then you shouldn't do that. The whole point is that there is not really any reason to pick Genji, even in dive. Why you're just not playing Tracer? You get more damage, you build pulse bomb faster, you're more maneuverable, and you're not as easy to zone out, right? A dive team can go in, but unless Genji had a really good position on a specific part of the map, a Zarya can just block him, right? He needs to be in 50-meter range. Why am I playing that when I can play Tracer, who can't get catched, who can flank around, play half-flank, very self-sufficient, and far more burst damage when it comes to just, or at least maybe not burst damage, but higher just straight amount of damage output when it comes to her guns, right? She's more survivable, she's faster, she's more flexible, she builds her bomb faster, which is really good to just, even if you can't stick it on a squishy, just stick it on a tank and you get a shit ton of burst on the tank, right? You can do so much with a fucking Tracer. Why not playing that and dive instead of the Genji? Pharah just got a buff with her hover jet, so she's a little bit easier to play with. Why just not playing Pharah and just bombing the shit out of their position? There's just so much shit that I personally think needs to get fixed. I have no clue why this is. If they want to keep Genji and make sure that he's not just a Dragon Blade machine and so on, which once again have been the whole point of him. He's good at kill securing and he's good at Dragon Blading. He has a very expensive ultimate that is high risk, high roll, requires skills. You need to actually hit your strikes. You can get stunned to oblivion. You can be counter-ulted. They have support ultimates that can deal with you. They have Baptiste with his immortality field that can deal with you. Mercy can fly away from you. If you fuck up your dash, you can get pushed and shoved by most heroes. You can get hooked away. Amora can just fade away from you. They can nade to slow you down, so there's more time to burn you. They can bubble to slow you down, so there's more time to burn you. There's so much that you can do to counter or slow down the blade so you have time to nuke him. Without talking about that most ultimates stops Dragon Blade, like Visor, or you can nano the targets to make it survive longer, or trance or beat, which just invalidates a lot of it, or you can armor with rally and just bonk Genji and stun him and then push him away and then keep on bonking him, and then there's AoE heals and armor pack stacks on whoever his target is to keep that guy alive. There's so much shit that just makes Genji really, 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 really weak when it comes to just straight out numbers. if you want to not have him as an ult, that he's just an ult generator, if you want him to be like more playing around with his shurikens and a little bit more in that department, which is not what he has ever been built for. The shurikens has always been really bad compared to other heroes' abilities. If you want to do that, then you gotta increase their damage, or their fire rate again, or something similar. Or the projectile speed, so he's easier to beam with his left click, so he can poke far more and be easier at harassing. You need to do something like that. Because if not, then you're saying, oh, don't play with Dragon Blade, because we're not gonna give you the ult shots for it. Play with your shurikens, but my shurikens are shit. And yes, I can to a certain extent try to off-angle and play high guns, which is the whole point of me, but Hanzo can do the same. Or I could just pick McCree and I can sit in the main group and I have a stun and I have insane amount of damage and I'm more survivable now because I got an HP buff. Or I can play Mei and I can wall people and I have faster cryo freeze heal now, and I can ice spikes across the map and deal 150 damage, and I have Blizzard, which is pretty fucking strong. Or I can play so many other heroes that is like focused on their primary fire, and that can still off-angle and be irritating, like a Tracer, or again a Hanzo. Hanzo's really good at off-angling and playing those high ground. He can't dive, like a Genji can, but he's still really good at that off-angling, playing with his primary fire, which is what it seems like they're trying to do with Genji. And it's just infuriating, because Genji players haven't been getting a lot of buffs. Like, Genji got nerfed very early in the season. I made a video on this on necros channel, and I will link that down in the description. It's the entire history of the balance patches and how Genji was played in the meta, pro play, and stuff like that. And I'll link it down in the description. He has been nerfed repeatedly, time over time. He's the hero that gets affected, one of the heroes that get affected the most by ultimate nerfs, because he's so reliant on his blade. That's like the whole point of him. That's why he's a good hero. Without a good Dragon Blade, he's shit. They nerfed his Dragon Blade because it was too strong. Then they nerfed Nano, which synchronizes with Genji's Dragon Blade. Then they nerfed then they gave more ult shots increases to him, right? And they did all this kind of stuff. They stopped us from triple jumping. They did all this kind of stuff. And then they finally gave him a buff. They removed the 2 damage per tick buff because they thought he was too strong. And now, again, he feels great, but he's not better. He's worse. It takes longer time to build a Dragon Blade. And even though he has a 10% speed increase to his fire rate, when it comes down to straight gameplay, 0.07 seconds fire rate increase doesn't do shit when it comes down to the gameplay. It doesn't come down, it doesn't have effect in teamfights. Over an entire match, maybe I'm dealing more damage, but it's not remotely enough killy to compensate for the amount of damage I have, the amount of build time on the blade that has been increased. Right, 9.7 seconds for a 15% ultimate increase, right? The numbers doesn't even add up. And I would say that, again, the whole point is make his primary fire, make him more plays, give him more playing opportunities with his primary fire, and that hasn't happened. His primary fire isn't better. It just feels better. It's just cleaner and more snappy and more responsive, and just feels like you don't have those weird, awkward delays anymore. I'm sorry that this is a long-ass video. If you made it to the end, type weep in the comment section. I'll heart the comments to see who made it to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it. Please share this around. As someone that's been dumping majority of his gameplay time into Genji, especially in the early days, and I scrimmed with him, and he's still, again, one of my kind of like favorite heroes, and probably the one that I am known for as a YouTuber to kind of be specializing in, even though I play most DPSs and also tanks and support, right? It just feels bad that he hasn't been shown a lot of love, and I have still been, going with that mentality that, he's a really skilled hero. You're playing a little bit with a handicap, but that's also what makes him so fun, because he's very, 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 very flexible, right? I've always been saying that. I've always been kind of pushing that mentality, and then seeing that they are strictly nerfing him when he wasn't even OP, I just don't understand, and it makes me a little bit infuriated, because, again, it just feels like there's so many other heroes in the game that is kind of getting buffs and changes, and that they're so strong, and it is clear that Genji isn't like a god tier pick, especially in solo queue, unless, again, if you're necros, you are an exception to the rule. Right? That's because he's a god. Mechanically, and again, just because you can make something work doesn't mean that it's better. That doesn't mean that you could do the same job with something, how do I say this? To kind of finish up my point. Just because you can make Genji work if you have a good team and in the right circumstances and blah, 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 blah. You can make him work if you're good enough and you're playing good enough and you know, you have the team to back you up and stuff like that. Doesn't mean that you couldn't do the exact same thing just a billion times easier by playing Hanzo or playing McCree. And that has always been the case with Genji. And I've always been okay with that. But when I then see them nerfing his ultimate, the one thing that is like, if my team isn't able to push in, either because I'm on Genji or because the enemy team composition or the map or my team composition or whatever fucking reason, I can at least just build a blade really fast and I can just blade and win the fight. That is nerfed. And then they're trying to say that they did it because the shurikens has been increased. But the increase is so little that it has no fucking impact on the gameplay. When it comes down to brass tacks, when it comes down to team fights, when it comes down to me diving a target, trying to kill it, it doesn't make a difference, stat-wise. I don't have a bigger advantage than I had before this patch went live, because it is 0.07 fucking seconds. That's it for today. Please take care of yourself, stay positive. I love you guys very fucking much. Again, the vaccines are coming. Please wear a mask, stay inside as much as you can if you have the opportunity. It's important, of course, that you take care of others, but also please do remember to take care of yourself. My name has been Jonal, and you guys keep the enemy in your roster.